We now look at how you can use MerlinXL to submit data back to HFM. Of course, in order to write data back to HFM, you must have write access to the selected point of view. This means you must have been provisioned to be able to submit data in shared services, and you must have write access to all the security classes that apply. Normally, the security class applied to the entity dimension. Then, in the MerlinXL report, you need to change the mode to read-write. This is via a button in the MerlinXL ribbon, and normally the default is read-only mode. And then, of course, before you can submit the data, you must ensure that the background point of view is set to one that allows data entry. This normally means ensuring all dimensions are set to base members, in particular remembering to set the value and ICP dimensions to base members, and ensure that in the row and column headers where you want to submit data, these are also set to base members. In this simple example, we have some base accounts in the row headers. Before submitting data, we must enable read-write mode, because normally by default MerlinXL reports are set to read-only mode, and you should only switch to read-write mode for reports that have been designed for data submission. When switching between modes, the worksheet will be refreshed, which is why you are asked to confirm that you wish to continue. When you switch to read-write mode, an extra button appears in the Merlin ribbon called Submit Data, and we'll look at that a little later. Currently, this report looks like any normal report because the point of view is set to one that does not support data entry. So I'll select the point of view form, and to save time, rather than working through each of the dimensions setting them to the none member, I will use a saved point of view that I set up especially for data input. A saved point of view will allow you to change the members of multiple dimensions at once, and is very useful when switching between an input level point of view and a reporting level point of view. To create a new saved point of view, select the Save tab, then the Manage button, and follow the instructions on the Saved Point of View wizard. Most of the dimensions are now set to an input level. However, the entity is still a parent. But when I set this to a base entity, the data cells in the report that support data entry turn yellow, and the data input cells will only turn yellow if the user's security permissioning grants them write access to those cells. If I type in a new number, the yellow cell turns orange to indicate that the cell value has changed. To send the data to HFM, we select the Submit Data button. Selecting the top half of the button will submit only the changed cells, and selecting the bottom half of the button will display a couple of options. The first one being to set the changed cells, and the second one to submit all data entry cells, both the orange and the yellow cells. I'm going to select the top half of the button to submit only the changed cells, i.e. the orange ones. A message confirms that the data has been submitted successfully, and the worksheet is refreshed. Note that the orange cell has reverted to a yellow cell. By default, when you submit the data, HFM will run a calculation and then refresh the data on the worksheet. Using the Submit Data options, it is possible to disable both of these options, but not recommended. If you want to delete data from a cell, just use the Delete button to delete the contents of the cell. The cell will turn orange, indicating the value has changed, and then select the top half of the Submit Data button to submit the changed cells. And once the data has been refreshed, the yellow blank cell confirms that the data has been cleared in HFM. Another common requirement is to submit data based on the value of an Excel formula. In this data cell, I will add a simple Excel formula linked to the green cell that's outside of the retrieval range. And because the contents of the cell have changed, it turns from yellow to orange. When the data is submitted, the cell reverts back to yellow and the formula is removed from the cell, just displaying the data retrieved from HFM. But if you wish the Excel formula to persist after you have submitted or retrieved the data, enclose the formula in parentheses or brackets so that when you submit the data this time, The cell with the Excel formula in remains orange, and the Excel formula enclosed in the brackets or parenthesis is retained in the cell, so that when the cells linked to the Excel formula are changed, and these linked cells don't have to be on the same worksheet, they can, for example, be in a separate workings sheet elsewhere in the workbook. So a data cell that contains a persistent formula, i.e. one in round brackets, will always be displayed with an orange background, even after the data has been submitted. The values in the Excel formulas are submitted to HFM and the formula is retained. So to summarize, if the cell formula is not enclosed in round brackets, the formula will be removed after the data has been refreshed, and the cell will turn back to yellow. But if the formula is enclosed in round brackets, then it is retained after the worksheet has been refreshed, and the cell stays orange. But using a formula that persists in a report after the data has been refreshed has to be used with care. For example, when you change the point of view, say to a parent entity, the cell stays orange and still displays the value of the Excel formula, which may now be invalid for this particular point of view. So use these persistent Excel formulas with care in your reports. I've changed the point of view to a parent entity, so this cell formula is no longer valid. Once you have submitted data, you may wish to run a consolidation at a parent level to see the impact of the data submission. If you right-click on a data cell and from the MerlinXL context menu, select the Calculate or Consolidate option, the HFM action form is displayed for the cell's point of view. Select the Consolidate option in the Consolidate section, and if you wish to track the progress of the consolidation, check the Display Running Tasks checkbox, and then select the Consolidate button. If you checked the option, the Running Tasks side pane will appear to display the progress of the consolidations. Check the Auto Refresh checkbox to update the status pane every 5 seconds. And check the Auto Hide checkbox to hide the Running Tasks task pane when all the consolidations have finished. And once the consolidation has finished, you can select the Refresh Worksheet option to display the consolidated data. One further thing you may wish to consider when building your MerlinXL data input forms is to hide certain dimensions in the POV form by selecting the Change Dimension Visibility option. As we've seen in other videos, by right-clicking on a dimension in the POV panel, you can choose to set the visibility of the dimension to hidden. And you may wish to do this for all custom dimensions, the ICP and value dimensions. In fact, you may wish to lock down all of the dimensions, so that when you're in report mode, users can't change away from the preset background point of view that supports the data entry. So far, we've only looked at submitting data from the active sheet. Let's look now at how you would submit data from an entire workbook. In this workbook, we have 3 data entry sheets, each one set for a different entity, and each one set to read-write mode. In MerlinXL data entry sheets, the Submit Data button only submits data for the active sheet. So to be able to submit the entire workbook, you must first add a workbook contents page using the Report Wizard Add New Report option. And this adds a new contents worksheet to the front of the workbook with an Excel table that lists all the worksheets in the workbook. By default, when this contents worksheet is created, it is set to read-only mode. And when you change it to read-write mode, and after confirming you're happy to refresh the worksheet, the Submit Data button appears in the MerlinXL ribbon. If we now enter data into each of the data entry sheets, without submitting the data on each sheet, then go back to the Contents page, the Submit Data button in the Contents page will submit the data for all the MerlinXL worksheets in the workbook. The top half of the button submits the data for the change cells only, and the bottom half displays a menu that allows you to choose to submit all data cells. And when it's finished, the last refreshed column is updated with the current date and time. Looking at the individual worksheets, we see that the data has been submitted in each. So to submit the data in an entire workbook, use the Submit button in the Contents page. An alternative way of submitting data for an entire workbook is to use the single POV workbook, and that is discussed in a separate video.